What's going on, Dolph fans? It is your boy Dillon, and I just wanted to give you some quick updates on the CBA, the collective bargaining agreement, as there have been some pretty notable updates to that situation, and it is obviously something that could have potential, massive potential ramifications for the Dolphins, obviously for the entire league if there's no agreement that's come to, and there's a stoppage, etc., 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 if there's a strike, what have you. So that's a big deal. It's potentially looming. It's still technically a ways away, because that wouldn't happen until after the 2020 season. So we still got a little bit to go before that would actually come into effect, a lockout or a strike, that is. And that's dependent on agreement not being come to or agreed upon, or something else. I guess there are other potential things that could push for that, or like a strike if the players weren't happy, whatever. Anyway, so but let's recap really fast on where we were last time we talked about it. So the NFL owners obviously voted in favor of it. The reps, the player reps, and the executive board both voted for it. If I'm not mistaken, it was the executives that narrowly voted against it, and then the player reps that voted for it. I might have those backwards, but anyway, either way, it did get approved to the point where it had then been sent to the overall NFLPA membership, which is the players, to vote on. Now, we also know that there have been several prominent players and lots of players just in general that have been speaking out against this. Quick interesting note of point of interest is that Ryan Fitzpatrick actually came out and said that he was voting for it. Just as some context, he is, a wealthy white dude that, which, overall doesn't matter. It's just a piece of context, but he is a wealthy, affluent white male, and he's got plenty of money. He's got a large family. He's doing well, and he's likely to be at the end of his career, should be retiring soon, probably not after this. So it's not even going to affect him, really. He's probably going to be out by the time it even really becomes a thing. He'll likely retire, especially if there ends up being a lockout next season. So it's not going to affect him, right? So, but just so as some added context to that situation. But to be fair to him, so I said that, he's a wealthy white male. But to be fair, I'm not saying that he's like racist or anything like that. There's no indication of that. In fact, I'm pretty sure he does good things with his money. I'm sure he donates, plenty of it, does, wonderful things. He seems like a wonderful and nice guy in a lot of ways and stuff like that. But it's just part of the context. Although there have been prominent players like J.J. Watt and Aaron Rodgers who have come out. They're also wealthy white men. So there's that. So it doesn't necessarily matter, but it is part of the context. But in his case, specifically though, as a player, like I said, he's likely to retire soon. So, it doesn't matter to him. It doesn't matter to him really at all, right? And I'm speculating here, but my guess is he probably didn't really read into it like that much. He just kind of looked at the basic tenets of it and was like, okay, it looks like this is probably all right. But, the further you delve into it, the more you realize that it's a terrible deal, especially since they can't renegotiate for 10 years. And, the supposed, 48% of the revenue that they're going to give to the players, I find that inconceivable that the owners and the NFL as a corporation would want to give away almost half of their revenue. Now, it's absolutely true that every team is like, 170 million in cap space. That's the base cap or whatever it is now. Yes, these players are multi-millionaires, but let's remember the owners are multi-billionaires. There's a pretty substantial difference between being a multi-millionaire and a multi-billionaire. Stephen Ross, for example, is worth currently $7.7 billion. $7.7 billion. Okay, so there is a substantial difference. And with this, with this agreement, they, I mentioned in one of the previous articles, they talked about, licensing rights and advertising and all that stuff. And now there's even been recent reports that they're looking not even just a 17-game schedule, they're actually looking to push that further to an 18-game schedule. Okay, there have been pretty massive developments actually in this. So the owners and stuff are trying to look to push that even further when the players are saying, no, look, we want to, we don't want that. We don't want an extra game because it's already hard enough on our bodies, but they don't care. They don't care. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. So, also another major news headline is that Russell Okung, offensive tackle, I believe he is one of the, lead representatives or whatever in the NFLPA and what have you for the players, et cetera, and he is pushing back pretty vehemently, saying that essentially accusing the powers that be in this situation to be trying to push it through so fast before, players can really, get a good deep look into it before, et cetera. And, they're just trying to hurry it up so that way they can get, a unanimous, it just needs to be, I think, if I remember correctly, a little over half, right? So they can just get a bunch of young guys that don't know what's really going on to just say yes. And then on top of that, there have been reports that guys have been wanting to change their vote, but the NFL is refusing to let them do it. Or the people in charge of this are refusing to let them change their votes. So, I mean, there's just so much shadiness. But here, let's real quick get to this one article that I wanted to read. NFLPA extends voting deadline from proposed CBA until March 14th. And here's another thing too, right? So the deadline was March 12th. Now they're pushing it back to March 14th, right? So they're doing all kinds of different, like, weird, shady things. So, but let's read this. The NFL Players Association announced Monday it has pushed back the voting deadline for the proposed collective bargaining agreement until March 14th. Every vote matters, and we encourage all players to review the materials sent via email in order to make an informed decision, the NFLPA said in the statement. So to me, what that sounds like, I mean, it depends on who exactly it's coming from. This was just a statement from the NFLPA, so some spokesperson. So I don't know exactly if it's coming from the upper brass. Likely, I don't know how much influence the owners in the NFL had in this statement, but it sounds kind of reminiscent to the same old kind of like talking point propaganda stuff that you hear in like politics, where hey, we have this this memo, whatever you want to call it, this couple page whatever of information, and this is a clear, concise way for you to understand what's going on, but it's probably very vague. It doesn't actually probably get into the details, etc., and it probably doesn't take into account some important things like how they will find ways to avoid and skirt actually giving the players half of their revenue like they say they will. Or, for that matter, they say, we'll stop harassing you a little bit for marijuana, but probably not really. So, and then just read this and then hurry up and vote. And then once you voted yes, we're going to make sure that you can't change your vote once you actually later find out how terrible this is for you, and so on, so on. Anyway, the players previously had until March 12th to vote on the proposed CBA. According to Albert Breer of the MMQB, players wanted more info to compare the 2011 CBA to the new proposal, also providing time to review all materials, which is good. So apparently the players did push for that, and so they did, it looks like, get a little bit of a concession there and a couple extra days, although that's still, as of right now, only 5 days away. And this is a few thousand players, and they only need a simple majority. So it's really not a lot of time, right? It's especially for, like, so, you know, a lot of these young guys might not really think, or might not really know, or you know, have read into it enough, or what have you. And, you know, and on the surface it might look good, and they might get fooled into thinking and then vote yes and not be able to change their vote. But the, you know, the handful of these veteran, you know, one of the opposing arguments for the veteran players that are speaking out is, well, they've already made their money, you know, so they don't really care about the younger guys. No, they do care. They say that it's not about the money. Fuck the money, which is right. It's about health, and it's about what's doing what's best for us, the quality of the game, safety, etc., etc., which the NFL has proven time and time again to do the opposite of those things. They don't give a shit about player safety or the quality of the game. It's all about their money and how much more money can they make. Can they become trillionaires eventually, right? So the thing about that is they might not have, you know, it looks like they got a little bit of a concession, got to push it back a couple days, but it's hard to be able to get accurate information out to all of those guys, you know, engage them and get them, you know, interested enough sometimes even to want to hear out the finer details and get the nuances of all of it, and hear the longer explanation of why this is actually bad for them. Anyway, as Ian Rappaport of NFL Network noted, the delay keeps NFL business on hold, but could also allow teams to use both the franchise tag and transitional tag before a new CBA, which would allow the use of only one tag, is ratified. The deadline for teams to use a tag on impending free agents is March 12th. The new CBA was approved by NFL ownership in February before the NFLPA's Board of Representatives also agreed to the deal in a closed vote. Okay, so there, to give clarity, because I said sometimes I mix those up. So obviously the owners voted for it. It's going to make them fabulously wealthy. And the NFLPA's Board of Representatives, so they're like executive board or whatever. The final step is for all players to vote on the agreement with a simple majority needed to pass. Although the player representatives passed the proposal, it has received significant backlash from high-profile players including Russell Wilson and Richard Sherman, including, you know, Aaron Rodgers and J.J. Watt. However, NFLPA President Eric Winston was confident about the process. I would think it would pass, Winston told Peter King of Football Morning in America. I would think it would pass by a lot. It's important that we let the process play out, and important that all players understand the issues and vote their conscience. If the CBA is ratified by the start of the new league year, March 18, it would go into effect for the 2020 season. But look, you know, it's hard to take the word of the representatives and the executives and the et cetera, when they do shady shit like say, oh, you know what? Once you voted, you can't change, just in case you figure, you know, because this is it's a process that plays out. And it's not exactly like, you know, casting a ballot in, you know, an election where it's just you stamp it and it's done. Right, they actually have some, or theoretically are supposed to have some time to parse it out, etc., etc. But they are making the NFL and the you know, powers that be are making it a point to say, no, you just cannot fucking change your vote. If for some reason you are compelled to change your vote, we are not going to let you. But theoretically, it could be somebody who would have voted or who voted no and wanted to change to yes. But it just goes to show you that they are just trying to control and manipulate it. Anyway, so that's what I got. Important updates because, again, so real quick, I mean, obviously if if no agreement ultimately comes to pass, right? If they are unable to agree to terms, then we could end up having a lockout after the 2020 season, right? So if there's nothing agreed upon when we get to, you know, the busy part of the season, so the, you know, training camp, and then particularly the preseason, and then the season, you know, it'll, you know, fly off into the wind for a little while. Everybody will forget about it because it won't be a thing. They won't even be talking about it between the NFLPA and the NFL and the players, etc., etc. I mean, there'll probably be some articles about it, especially if there ends up being some drama or some protest or something like that. But ultimately, there's not going to be a lot of negotiations, is my point. And then it will resume again in the off season. But if it gets to that point, it's likely to end up in a lockout with a disagreement and no agreement come to, right? So, but additionally though, if with the way that they've locked, you know, players in already to their votes, you know, they and with the statements that this representative said that he feels like it'll pass overwhelmingly, it's possible that a lot of these guys have already cast their votes, you know, even though the original deadline is still 3 days away. Maybe they just looked at it on the surface and was like, all right, you know, whatever. Or it's a young guy that, you know, just wants to make sure he can continue playing football next year and there isn't a lockout and gets his paycheck, you know, whatever. Just voted yes because of that, not really knowing how terrible it is for them, and they're locked in, but they've already got their votes in. So the extension might not even matter. They might even already have, you know, a substantial lead in the votes or whatever and leaning towards passing it. So they could just end up being stuck into it at this point. But if that's the case or whatever, if it does pass and the players are actually not okay with it overwhelmingly or as a majority, you know, and if there are players that voted yes, just looking at it on its face and not knowing, and then got, you know, the information and realized that it was ultimately bad for them, then and wanted to switch their vote, then maybe if there is a majority in that regard, then maybe they do end up striking, and maybe they're like, no, look, fuck this, you know, you guys baited us in, you're trying to give us scraps while you guys make all kinds of, you know, untold amounts of billions of dollars. You say you're going to give us 48% of the revenue. That's unimaginable. I mean, in the capitalistic world that we live in the world that we live in today, does anybody honestly think that the NFL and the owners are willing to give like half of their revenue away to the players? I can't fathom that. Nearly 50%, 48.5%, I think is what it was. I mean, it's just crazy. Anyway, so that's what I got for you guys. I wanted to update you on that because it is pretty substantial and there's a lot going on with that. Again, you know, like Russell Okung is pushing back pretty hard too. I mean, tons of these high profile players, and that could be, you know, that's why I said a lot of the young guys might have already cast their votes, but looking at it on the surface, but they could be looking at the way these veteran guys who have been there before and who have gone through this shit already, right? Some of those guys, some of those veterans were there for the last CBA proposal and agreement and so on and so forth, and they've seen the effects of it, right? So they, you know, with how vehemently they're speaking out, some of these young guys might be taking a second look and being like, you know what, they're right, this is fucking, anyway, I think you guys get the point. So that's what I got for you guys. It is super important, and it is something that we absolutely need to keep an eye on and talk about, because it could have major potential ramifications going forward, especially as these Dolphins are supposedly building towards something great. So that could be another major wrench in the cogs along the way if it comes to pass that there's a lockout or a strike, etc., etc. Anyway, with that, I'm gonna get up out of here. I hope you guys enjoy my videos and perspective. If you do, make sure you hit the subscribe button, make sure you hit the like button, make sure you hit the bell if you want to get the alerts. Share my channel and videos with your friends and family. Leave your questions, comments, and concerns down in the comment section. And of course, as always, make sure you follow me on Twitter at Dillon Tartaro. And with that, I am out. I'll see y'all soon. Fins up.